What is an art game? Can a video game be classified as art? Clearly, based on the title of this video, our answer is yes. Much like the development of films or the evolution of art forms in painting, eventually, sometimes with grumbling from critics, these evolutions turn into a widely accepted art style. We're not interested in trying to convince anyone, one way or the other, but we believe video games are a new medium for art. When it comes to the definition of an art video game, people will obviously have subjective ideas to fit that category.
But the games we consider art all have a few things in common. First, the story is told in an unconventional way, often cryptic. The designers use surrealism and metaphor to show a unique perspective. Most of these games have little to no dialogue and leave room for interpretation. Rather than told outright or directly, the story is revealed through gameplay and images.
Second, the game has an emotional core. As you move through the stories, you become attached to the characters and empathize with their experience. Eventually, you'll settle into the mood and tone that the game sets.
Third, and most important, art games are atmospheric with excellent sound design. In some of these games, there are musical cues that sync up with the events of the story, while others incorporate the natural environment as their soundscape. In some, moments of silence emphasize the more somber tones of the story. In any format, the sound design is key in setting the tone. All the games on this list are atmospheric, and without strong sound design, their intention would be far less effective. These games may only have one or the other of the first criteria. However, all of these games are atmospheric as f***. There are many single-player examples of art games, but today we're focusing on those that can be played along with a partner.
Top 10 co-op art games. Let's begin with a game that potentially inspired all of the games on this list.
Did you know Eco can be played co-op? This option becomes available after beating the game in single player. A second player can now control Yorda. This is only available in the PS3 remaster and the PAL release of the PS2 version.
This game has it all: mysterious lore, an eerie atmosphere, and an emotional core. You follow the journey of a young, horned boy, Eco, as he's brought to a tomb inside a temple. The reason for his imprisonment is unknown, but later you begin to learn that humans sacrificed all children with horns out of fear of what they may become in the future.
The co-op in this game is really only for die-hard Eco fans who want to experience the story in a slightly new way. The second player does nothing more than avoid enemies and climb things, literally just walking. Now, perhaps this is an improvement for the first player, because having a human behind Yorda rather than a brain-dead AI is definitely a step up, but it's not enjoyable for the person controlling Yorda. We often switched characters throughout the game to keep it interesting. At least Yorda can pick up barrels and explosives, I guess.
The designers of the game expertly used the natural soundscape in place of music to create the perfect eerie setting. You often hear the sounds of wind, waves crashing, birds, and the sounds of your own footsteps. You truly feel alone. Suddenly, you hear sinister music and you know the shadow creatures have appeared to take Yorda away. It's instant terror. But when you sit on those save benches and finally hear that chipper music, you instantly feel a sense of relief. Those dark demons won't get you now.
There are almost no spoken words in the game. The dialogue that is included complements the experience and propels the story forward. Even with the low amount of communication between characters, you develop a strong emotional connection to Eco and his relationship to Yorda. You become invested in his safety, and your heart breaks for him when Yorda is no longer with him. I wish this game was built around co-op, but with everything it has going for it, I'll take what I can get. Eco and Shadow of the Colossus pushed the boundaries of what a video game could be. They offered an experience with depth, and their influence can be seen in the games that followed.
Brothers is the game that's most clearly inspired by Eco. From the environments and landscapes, to the climbing and puzzles, to the storyline with depth, to the fake language, it all connects back to Eco. Hell, they even took the benches from Eco, and the developers spoke openly about this influence. If you're unaware, this is the first game by the team that brought you A Way Out and It Takes Two.
This game follows the journey of an older brother and younger brother working together to save their dying father. Brothers has some great calming and perfectly balances segments between an environmental soundscape and an emotional musical score that swells during dramatic scenes in the story. Brothers is intended to be a single-player game. On one controller, each character is designated to a separate analog stick. You're required to maneuver both characters in tandem, and it can become quite the multitasking exercise for one person. However, the Nintendo Switch version of Brothers finally allows for two-player co-op. I understand this removes the main gimmick of the gameplay, but it works really well as a two-player game, even if it is a lot easier. Both characters are equal to the story with unique strengths and skills, but are required to work together to progress. This is a real cooperative experience.
This has one of the most heart-wrenching conclusions of any game I've ever played. One part of the gameplay requires an emotionally devastating task that you have to slowly play out in real time. We won't spoil it, just be aware.
I absolutely love this game. I've now played through it 3 times. It's ideal to play it in one sitting so that you become enveloped in the emotional roller coaster and just experience it fully. But the one thing that takes away from the story is the fake language. It's just really hard to take seriously. There aren't any subtitles, so the fake language literally doesn't add anything. There's no dialogue in this game whatsoever, but for some reason they're constantly speaking in this pig Latin that just no one needed to hear. Other than that, it's a great game.
Much like Brothers, Morcrid is another game that can be played single player with each character dedicated to a separate analog stick on one controller. However, it was actually developed with co-op in mind. I believe that is the best way to experience this game. The creators mentioned that Brothers and Inside were big inspirations for their game.
You play as 2 dark figures that must move around a glowing ball of light. Without the light, the characters will both die. Morcrid is a very dark game, literally and figuratively. As you maneuver the glowing orb and complete various puzzles, you have a constant uneasy feeling. This game design mixes natural environmental sounds, including creatures moaning, water droplets, and wind, with a dark musical score to really set you on edge.
There's so much up for interpretation on this one, but there are hints throughout the game of an ancient lore. If you want to hear our detailed analysis, check out our video where I explain the story and theories behind Morcrid. As mentioned before, this is a really great, equal cooperative experience. Not only do you have to work together, but you also must be in sync because one false move could cause either player to die in the shadows. There's a clear line connecting Morcrid to the physics-based puzzles of Eco and Brothers. All 3 of these games have straightforward tasks that don't require too much brain power to complete and progress forward. These usually involve standing on switches or pulling levers.
This game takes a crazy turn at the end that you may or may not be into, but the overall experience is amazing and well worth your time. The story design will draw you in and is incredibly immersive. It leaves a lasting impression and you'll be thinking about the game for days afterwards.
Here's another game that constructs a dark and unnerving atmosphere and cryptic story. Your character's spaceship crashes in a mysterious post-apocalyptic world. As you move through the game, you find computers and journals with vague messages hinting at how the world came to this current state. Unlike the previous games that were inspired by Eco, this one clearly draws inspiration from early cinematic platformers like Another World and Flashback. It's a remake of the fictional Eternal Castle from 1987. Literally, it's a remastered version of a game that never existed. That's where this incredible visual style comes from. It's a throwback to the 2-bit CGA graphics style of home computers of the 80s.
As a co-op game, Eternal Castle can be fun, but it certainly can be frustrating as well. You constantly feel like it never quite meets its potential in this area. Clearly, co-op was an afterthought. While you do have a secondary character with the same skills, this character can't heal, can't activate switches or open doors, and the final blow is that you can't participate in the final level of the game. Player 2 is entirely dependent on the first player, bringing them back to life at the meditation shrines, and when you move to a new screen, player 2 may be stuck behind because the camera only follows player 1, requiring player 1 to go back and get them. Player 2 may miss out on huge portions of the game until the next shrine is available. This game would have been amazing if equal co-op had been prioritized. That being said, it's still beneficial and fun to team up with a friend to fight the enemies.
As we mentioned before, it has a minimal color palette and pixel style. It's incredible how much they're able to convey with such simple visuals. We regularly found ourselves stopping to admire the environments. The designers did an incredible job setting the dark tone with visuals that set you on edge. Swarms of flies, scenes with rain, dilapidated buildings, and bodies hanging. Once again, the designers balanced silence, nature sounds, and then brought in an incredible synth soundtrack to highlight the beats of the story. From start to finish, all the sounds are effective in cultivating an ominous tone that builds tension and adrenaline. As with previous games, the ending is ambiguous, leaving room for interpretation. What this game lacks in emotion, it makes up for in tone and atmosphere. You'll find yourself immersed and invested in completing the story.
Hyper Light Drifter is another game that uses a minimalist art style to create vibrant landscapes and hyper-stylized pixel animations. You follow the journey of the Drifter, a silent protagonist with a lightsaber-style sword. As you explore decaying ruins in a world covered in the remnants of war, you quickly learn he's suffering from a terminal illness. Hyper Light Drifter plays like an old-school Zelda or Diablo game.
This co-op features a clone of the main character. Similar to Eternal Castle, the second player is just there to fight and cannot interact with the environment or partake in puzzles. Once again, the camera only follows player 1, and once the first player dies, the mission ends regardless of the state of player 2. It's disappointing that it's not an equal experience for the second player. Regardless, the gameplay is definitely easier and still enjoyable as a duo.
Hyper Light Drifter has an incredibly dynamic soundtrack, a mixture of a cinematic score and electronic beats. It perfectly sets the mood of the story. I love how this story is told. There's zero dialogue throughout the game. Everything is expressed through images. It's the perfect example of show, don't tell. The player unravels the secrets during gameplay and is trusted to come to their own conclusion.
The lead designer, Alex Preston, has expressed his lifelong struggle with congenital heart disease. It's clear to see the game is used as a metaphor to express some of his feelings of coping with the disease. I love the idea of this art medium being used to share a personal life experience, allowing the gamer to participate in and come to a deeper understanding of another human's experience.
This is another example of a human experience being told through gameplay in a deeply artistic interpretation. Arise is a 3D puzzle platformer that follows the story of a man reliving the memories of his life. The main gimmick of the game is time manipulation and controlling the natural landscape.
Arise has an incredibly unique two-player experience. Player 1 maneuvers the old man, the protagonist, while Player 2 is in control of the environment and time itself. It might not be for everyone, but we thoroughly enjoyed the cooperative element of this game. Player 2 has to expertly fast forward or rewind time to create a safe path for the character, changing ocean tides, putting falling rocks into slow motion to create platforms, stopping wildfires, raising and lowering the snowfall, and directing the paths of wildlife. Despite not being a playable character, the second player's role is crucial to the game. Nature itself becomes a character. People may say the second player's role creates an unequal experience, but we really enjoyed it and recommend it.
Like some of these other games, the story is told without dialogue. You find statues and images along the way that reveal past memories. This story is equally as effective as Hyperlight Drifter when it comes to allowing the player to uncover the narrative on their own. Arise has stylized 3D visuals that don't try to appear realistic, which I believe works in its favor. The visual design is incredibly breathtaking and, at other times, intense and dark to perfectly capture the tone of each chapter of his life. Combined with a cinematic soundtrack, these details work well to bring your emotions front and center. The soundtrack truly reads like a Hollywood movie score. It's top-notch musicianship that fits every peak and valley of the story.
While the game begins in the early, happy memories of the man's childhood, it quickly moves to the hardships of relationships and life. I will give some spoilers here and trigger warnings, so skip ahead if you want. This game expresses grief in the most profound and metaphoric gameplay experience. After the man meets his true love, they find out they're expecting a baby. You enter this chapter full of swelling, joyful music, with flowers blooming and golden light. Suddenly, just as you're waiting for the giant flower to bloom, awaiting the birth of the child, the world turns dark. The flower dies, and you come upon a forlorn statue of a child wrapped for burial. These designers are true artists as they express that journey of deep grief. You enter the next chapter entitled Ashes. The man stumbles through a barren wilderness of thorns and darkness. It's quiet and depressing. His sobbing echoes around you. He comes upon a statue of the dreams he had, him and his wife holding hands with their child, and a wildfire engulfs them all. Suddenly, the man is on a path of raging wildfires ahead and shadow versions of himself chasing him from behind, and he cannot get a break from the overwhelming pain of it all. Then he enters the chapter called Solace. The statue of his wife, sobbing, floats in the distance. He tries endlessly to reach her, but no matter what path he takes, she is still distant. He works tirelessly until, finally, he draws the statues together and they are reunited. If you've ever experienced the loss of a loved one, you may want to play this wildly emotional game. More specifically, if you've experienced child loss, miscarriage, or infertility, this game provides an emotional, therapeutic outlet, and I highly recommend playing it with your partner and crying together. It brought me back to my grief after my miscarriage, and I wept through the entire story. I want to see more games that convey this much emotional depth and allow for human experiences to be shared in such artistic ways.
Never Alone is another game about human experience, but this one focuses on the cultural aspect. It's a cinematic platformer that follows a girl named Nuna from an Inuit tribe and her fox friend as they search for the source of the eternal blizzard. The co-op gameplay in Never Alone is really solid. Player 1 controls Nuna, and player 2 controls the fox. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses, and are required to work together to progress. The fox has the ability to climb and communicate with the spirits. Nuna can use her slingshot as well as push objects. Everything is balanced between players, and there really isn't any time during the game where anyone feels left out.
What makes Never Alone stand out is how it incorporates culture and folk tales into its narrative and gameplay. Throughout your playthrough, you'll encounter owls that trigger short documentary clips that teach you about Inuit heritage. This really takes me back to my days of playing Oregon Trail in elementary school history class. To this day, I still remember the details of the Oregon Trail because games are a way to gain experiential knowledge about a subject. It goes to show, video games are a powerful yet highly underutilized tool for education. We would love to see more developers use this medium to teach us about interesting topics, especially history and customs of other nations. One really special aspect of the game is that the story is told by a narrator speaking in the native language of the tribe, while the players read subtitles. How incredible that this rare language is now archived in a video game. We get to hear a language that we would probably never encounter, a language known by only a few hundred people in the whole world.
Never Alone has a strong emotional core. You truly feel the bond between Nuna and the fox, and that bond only grows as they get further along in their journey together. There are a few moments in the game that bring a tear to your eye. Because you're playing such vulnerable characters, you feel the weight of their death if you fall into the water, and so you start to maneuver with even more care. Towards the end of the game, there's a big change in the gameplay that we felt distracted from the story, but maybe you'll feel differently. The soundtrack is pretty atmospheric and helps highlight the isolated and lonely feeling of a person out in the Arctic. It also seems to contain some instruments and vocal chanting of the tribe. Speaking of that isolated vibe, along Nuna's journey, she encounters only one other human, while the rest of her interactions are with spirits and animals. This could also be why the bond with the fox feels so important. He's your only companion as you navigate the treacherous, icy landscape. We also played Fox Tales, the DLC. It's an additional short story with some updated visuals and new gameplay mechanics. We also recommend you try that one.
Igling namin kubay chahutik pakannegat ilan norating anak si maramin dagamin.
Child of Light is another example of a video game using legend to set the scene, this time using a folktale from Austria. It's a turn-based RPG with puzzle platforming mixed in. In this story, we follow Aurora, the daughter of an Austrian duke in the 1800s. She passes away from a mysterious illness and awakens in the mythical world of Lemuria. It is her quest to recover the stars, sun, and moon of this land in order to defeat the Black Queen and return home to her father on the other side of the mirror that links the two worlds.
As expected, Player 1 controls Aurora, while Player 2 controls her guide and companion, Igniculus, a small blue firefly. While Igniculus is definitely an assist character, he has special abilities unique to only him. His light unlocks things and can shine brightly to slow down enemies during battle. This definitely benefits the first player's gameplay, but the second player could potentially become bored with the limited participation. Child of Light's entire story is told through poetry narration in ABCB rhyme format. This gets old fast, but I guess we respect all that effort.
Once the sun shone upon a land of sequined valleys and peaks of white, and at night ruined castles glowed with alabaster light. From the stars and the crescent moon, a queen of light ruled this rambling place. Each night she walked the palace alone, her luminosity dawn's own face.
The watercolor visuals combined with a cinematic musical score creates an eerie, otherworldly feeling. The story is fairly straightforward with the narration, but there are still parts that are left for interpretation.
The platforming sections outside of battle are at times reminiscent of Limbo or Inside. We felt that the turn-based battle was a unique take, but it soon starts to feel like a chore and greatly slows down the pacing of the story. If the battles and spoken narration were removed, we feel that this game would have been a more focused and immersive experience.
Voyage and Child of Light share these beautiful scenes of hand-drawn watercolor visuals. The two playable characters begin in an unknown area with no information provided. After solving the first puzzle, you awaken on the forest floor, seemingly emerging from a damaged spaceship. You must now venture into this new and mysterious land. Voyage is a cinematic platformer with simple puzzle mechanics.
Here you are provided with an equal, cooperative adventure. All the puzzles and navigation require collaboration between the players to progress. You have to work together to move objects and help each other climb rocks. You can even give each other hugs for no game purpose other than love. The puzzles won't create any frustration for you and your partner during your playthrough, but if you ever get lost, there's a button that triggers a flash which highlights the location of your next goal. There is little to no conflict in the game at all. It's really just about the incredible experience. It's an experience that should be shared with someone you're close to.
Voyage checks all the boxes for a co-op art game, starting with a cryptic story told without dialogue. Our protagonists travel through a vivid landscape, encountering creatures and spirits, moving between nature and abandoned spaceships. There's so much attention to detail in the environment and art direction. As players, you have a really unique perspective. You seem to be an observer of the Voyagers, with objects in the foreground between you and the characters. Maybe the designers wanted us to feel like the spirits, watching over the girls as they find their way. Their past history and the path that lies ahead are completely ambiguous, and it remains so until the end of the game. Even then, it's not spoon-fed directly to the players.
It may be a mysterious story, but one thing is clear. There is a feeling of deep connection between the characters and an underlying emotional tone to the entire journey. The musical score really drives home this emotion, flowing between soft, mysterious notes and eclectic tunes, all while remaining subtle and never overbearing. It perfectly complements and carries the story. While the game is certainly atmospheric, it stays away from going towards the darker moods like the other games on this list, and instead feels safe and peaceful. Again, this game has no conflict or challenge, yet it keeps your attention at all times, and maybe that's the point. Some games don't need all the spectacle and gimmicks to be worthwhile and completely captivating. This is one of those games. It's just about the experience. This game should be extremely popular. We're not sure why it isn't talked about more. This is the third time we've brought it up in our videos. It really left a lasting impression on us. That's what's so special about this game. The bond that the characters share translates to the players, cultivating this feeling of connection.
And now the final game on our list. We put it in this position because we wanted to end on a positive note. Like Voyage, Pode utilizes the art format to write a wholesome narrative. Pode is a co-op puzzle platformer about a rock trying to help a fallen star get back into the sky.
This is a top-notch cooperative experience. Every aspect of the game was designed specifically for co-op players. The playable characters, Boulder and Glow, each have their own unique talents and must join forces in order to advance. Glow can float around, teleport, and grow incredible foliage, while Boulder can trip heavy switches, move objects, and make crystals appear out of the ground. The puzzling is so fun. Sometimes this is as simple as giving Boulder a boost up to a higher platform so they are able to push in a switch. Other times, Glow will be using their power to grow plants to help you across big gaps. For an added bonus, the characters combine and form special combo skills needed to progress forward. Throughout the experience, you'll consistently be fully utilizing both characters' powers to navigate the map and solve puzzles.
Visually, Pode is something special. The simple yet artfully crafted world is, at times, breathtakingly beautiful. The stylized look of the game is something that will hold up for years to come. As both players travel through this environment, with a push of a button, Boulder and Glow are able to transform their surroundings into dazzling gems and colorful foliage, respectively. This is just one of the examples of how this game constantly makes you want to take a moment just to soak in the amazing view. The sound design is equally effective. There is an orchestral score that sets the mood as it unfolds. For every important moment in the game, there is a musical accompaniment that perfectly encapsulates the emotions of the story. Once again, Pode is a perfect telling of a narrative without dialogue. The story is fairly straightforward, but murals in different levels suggest an ancient culture and that there might be more than meets the eye. On the spectrum of story moods, Pode is similar to Voyage and is the opposite of the dark and heavy tales we highlighted earlier. This game focuses on the optimism of relationships as two different beings unite.
Don't be fooled by the cute look of the characters. This game balances between being lighthearted while carrying some emotional depth. The story weaves together feelings of slowly connecting with another, sorrow at their absence, and intense joy when reunited. From start to finish, it's a feel-good game. It's a universal story of relationships, relatable to all languages and cultures. I love Pode. It's at the top of my list of favorites. I specifically love playing Glow. Pode is everything I would want in a co-op game. We've been so excited to curate this list and record this video, and we're glad that it's out there for you to enjoy. This one's been a long time in the making.
These types of games are our absolute favorite. I hope developers continue to use video games as their outlet for expressing art.
Those are all of the co-op art games we have to talk about. Are there any we missed?
And what are your favorite art games? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Smash that motherfucking like button, you little chode. Bebop, stop, pop, sweat, shotgun, drop, bar, up, flop, chop, slop. Co-op.